Well, hello there, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Lou Reviews, the destination for critical thinking in the realm of the unexplained. Please do me a favor. Don't forget to smack that like, share, and subscribe button. Ring the bell. That way you are notified anytime we go live. And if you want to support us with the almighty dollar, there are links in the description below. So please go check those out. They obviously help us do more shows. Today, we're going to be covering the good, the bad, the ugly on the Dave Grusch interview with Joe Rogan. And if we got time, we'll get to Matt Ford seeing orbs, which was really funny. It's just amazing how like people are so blind of their own belief systems. I mean, even at my most ardent belief system and my full blinders on, I was still aware of my belief system, and it even being aware of it, it's difficult to fight it. So I understand, but at the same time I don't understand now, again, because it's like you've got the opportunity to put on the glasses and really look at the information, and you're kind of just ignoring it. But I think you guys are going to be kind of surprised at some of my David Grusch takes today. This is not going to be an absolute roast fest. I think there's some things here that, I don't know, we could get into. We could talk about. I could tell you, just like I've said in the past, if Lou Elizondo is lying, man, he's in for a world of trouble. If he's just simply mistaken and believing things people are telling him, and it seems that's one of the things we're going to get into with this conversation. It seems like both of these guys have a lot of the same sources of information when it comes to the things that they believe or the things that they subscribe to. I just heard some kind of donation button here. Or somebody, oh no, I'm sorry. Marius Doolin just subscribed. Thank you so much for subscribing to Lou Reviews. I truly appreciate it. So that's one of the red flags that I have with Dave Grusch is a lot of this whole interview with Joe Rogan that he had, a lot of it.
That was happening.
We'll get to that in a second, Dave Grusch. Let's go ahead and switch views here. Where was I? Anyway, I do believe that he had some decent moments in this discussion. But again, there's more red flags than decent moments. And so I'm going to try and be down the middle as possible on this discussion. But there were some interesting things that he said that if he turns out to be telling the truth, we've got something kind of interesting here. So, all I'll say is just have an open mind for either way. But yeah, again, I feel like there's more red flags. Let's get into it. Let's talk about it. So, let's get into my bookmarks. Now, these clips are in no particular order. I think we'll go over this hill rising once we get to the very end of everything that we're talking about here. But yeah, I've clipped so many things, and it's just everything that we need to just discuss and consider when we listen to this discussion on Joe Rogan. And there's going to be things. I can tell you, we got a lot of information. There's not a lot of information, but there's some really good little nuggets, and we're going to get into those nuggets. One of them being the Department of Energy that he names. Again, like I've been saying, the Department of Energy for a long time, and that hurts my ears when he said that. But again, we'll get into it. Greg O'Brien, thank you so much for the $20 donation. I truly appreciate it. I see Carl Crusher is here. What's up, Carl Crusher? He is surrounded by shady folks. Greg O'Brien says, I only cry in the shower. And he is he is surrounded by the shady folks. That is a good way to put it, Carl. I want to say hi to also a whole bunch of people in the flat, Simon, in the chat, Simon Fly, Greg O'Brien, which again with a donation, John Hunsley, Fifi Barboa, Clump Lizziert, Yoshi, Wise Monkey. I see all you guys. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. Make sure to share the show and share the show. So anyway, let's get into a couple of these clips and just go through them randomly and what works. You know, we'll go again. It'll be in no particular order. There you go. There's your there's your little emoji for the $20 donation, Greg O'Brien. I truly appreciate it. It's a little later than when it takes a second to come in, but eventually gets there. So again, thanks for the $20, man. So I guess let's start here. This is a really great, because it sort of sets a table for everything that we're about to listen to. Stephen Greenstreet tweeted this out. So it turns out, quote, UFO whistleblower David Grusch was inspired, influenced, and informed by Lou Elizondo, Leslie Kean, Jay Stratton, Hal Puthoff, Eric Davis, Travis Taylor, George Knapp, and Jeremy Corbell. Wow, never saw that coming. And then he included a picture of David Grusch sitting with Jay Stratton, George Knapp, and Travis Taylor. Travis Taylor, George Knapp, in particular, have put out a lot of terrible information that should have been retracted, never has been. Put out a bunch of UFO lore, made things super confusing. Hype up things like Skinwalker Ranch, along with Jay Stratton, who was on this season of the Skinwalker Ranch show. So, and this is from 2022. This guy was attending UFO conferences. And what is funny is he was like, I wasn't a UFO guy, but man, he sure does know a lot about UFO lore. He knows a lot about UFO history. He listens to a lot of the UFO discussions, and he references them in this Joe Rogan interview. He reads all the UFO books, including Lakatsky's books. So, he's a big fan of George Knapp. He knows Jeremy Corbell. I mean, he says all of these names many times in this interview. And that's what I think was one of the most frustrating parts of it, is we've heard all of these names. All of these guys have been in the game since at least 2017. Most of them have been here since the 80s, some of them. So it's not impressive, the group of people that are pushing and surrounding this guy. I'm not sure. And this really begins like I really start to question why he's going to the debrief, why he's going to Yes Theory, why he's going to Joe Rogan instead of the New York Times, the Washington Post, the AP, his lawmakers, and why are they not? There's 40 whistleblowers that are testifying or have testified to Arrow. They should have all come out on the same day. They should have all come out on the same day. That'd be a lot more difficult to just ignore. You can't ignore 40 witnesses that are claiming that they had access, to these top secret programs. It's a little more difficult to do that. It's a little more difficult to scrutinize. It'd be a hell of a lot funner, because then we could be able to look into all of these people and the programs they claim to work for and the things that they claim to have seen. We need that. We need a big statement, right, on this topic. I think all of us could agree on that. But unfortunately, he hasn't done that. He's gone through known hoaxers and grifters and people that, are not reliable on this topic. For example, Leslie Kean was one of the people he mentioned. And so this is a quote from Leslie Kean, and she was the one who wrote the New York Times article, which she had to rescind a quote from Harry Reid. The next day, they had to correct the article just on Harry Reid, but they haven't corrected a lot of the things that they've gotten wrong, and they've omitted a ton of stuff, especially from the OSAP and ATIP program, including the werewolves smoking cigarettes, and wearing trench coats. So You know, she omits what she wants, and here's a perfect example of it. And a lot of people don't know this. They really either don't know this or they just they ignore it. Leslie Kean was deep into the Dr. Stephen Greer organization and cabal. She helped Dr. Stephen Greer a lot. Especially during the Disclosure Project and all of those things that he did in the early 2000s. She was there step by step. Yet when I first became aware of Leslie Kean and her first book on the UFO topic, I had never heard that she was part of Dr. Stephen Greer's cult. It essentially is what that is, the CE5 cult. So, you know, now she's writing articles for the New York Times. But anyway, here's her quote. In 2021, Leslie Kean admits that she had to, quote, walk away from Dr. Stephen Greer due to crash retrievals. In 2023, she embraces them. How the Pentagon started talking about taking UFOs seriously. Of compelling evidence concerning UFOs, and she couldn't understand why a speaker would make an unsupported assertion about alien cadavers when she could be talking about hard data. To Kean, the corpus of genuinely baffling reports deserves scientific scrutiny regardless of how you felt about aliens. Quote, there were some good people at that conference, but some of them were making outrageous, grandiose claims, Kean told me. I knew then that I had to walk away. Greer had hoped that members of the media would cover the event. She knew that she had to walk away on 21. And then here in, the debrief article in 2023, she's quoted as saying intelligence officials have U.S. have retrieved craft, inferring that, we have crashed alien bodies and craft. She changes her stories all the time. She doesn't correct things when she gets them wrong, and she omits the shit out of a lot of stuff, including the claims from David Grusch that aliens have killed people. Like, that's a claim from David Grusch. Let's not forget that one. He has claimed that these biological entities have killed people, Americans. So they omitted that from the debrief article. Why? They wanted to omit it as well from the Washington Post version of the article, but the Washington Post was like, nah, we're not being rushed. We're not going to be rushed to post this story that we can't corroborate the sources or anything that's coming out about it. Hold on one second, guys. Is the chat working? There we go. Okay, now it's working. That was weird. All right. Anyway, so, all of these sources that he mentions, they're all really questionable, man. Like, I want to believe this guy. I want to believe Dave Grusch. Like, he seems like, again, like a Lou Elizondo where you're like, he seems like a cool guy. And he's a giant. He's 6'5". Like, he's a massive man, right? And we're going to get into some of his claims here in a second, but I noticed that he had a scar on the top of his head during this interview. I wonder if he cracked it on something like the airplane when he was going to Texas to do the Rogan podcast. Who knows? But yeah, one of those things I noticed. I also noticed that he wore the same shirt for the Yes Theory interview to the Joe Rogan podcast. So I guess he really likes that shirt. Again, these stupid little things that I noticed that I think are kind of funny. All right, so let's get into a couple of these clips. What's the first one I got here? Let's hit this one up. Again, none of these are in any particular order. Let me go ahead and just make sure that the sound is good for you guys and also comes through on the podcast version of things. All right, here we go. So this video is was shared. This clip was shared by Mick West, and it says Dave Grusch describes a supposedly accurate psychic viewing program developed by the U.S. military that was shut down for an unknown reasons. Maybe bureaucracy. There's $1 million in prizes for anyone who could demonstrate this power. So this is him talking about the remote viewing program, which is Uri Geller really like none of this has been proven to be effective at all. As a matter of fact, the idea is that it's more likely that these programs were green-lit to get our enemies to think that we were actually working on this when we weren't taking it seriously whatsoever. And so, again, counterintelligence, counterespionage, those were the kinds of things we were doing with programs like this in a lot of cases. So keep that in mind as well. But okay, so here we go.
Like the Stargate program, right? With declassified by Clinton and sensibly canceled, I guess, in 96. Where you had people trained in remote viewing and like there was feedback loops to confirm what they saw was real, and either satellite imagery or human sources where they sketched out a room of where there's hostages, and they got a hostage out, and they're like, and this is a real story actually, and they're like, did you have a source in that room? How do you know where all the corridors were and everything? And it's like, no, actually, Pat Price remote viewed you. And he's like, what the fuck? So there's something going on there. And that's like Gary Nolan, has studied.
Here's the thing, too. I'm going to stop this clip right here. The one thing that I saw after this interview a few times were people praising how eloquent Dave Grusch was during this interview and how smart he seemed. I curse a lot on this show, okay? But I'm an actor. I'm a comedian. I'm just some schmo, right? I'm not making one of the biggest claims in the history of humanity. So I feel like the standard should be a little different for me. Thank you for the donation, James Craig. Appreciate that. He says, Grusch is being influenced by the put-off cabal. I can't argue with that. I can't argue with that. Cannot argue with that at all. But so, that threw me off. We lost a stupid video. This is going to be a pain in the butt. What I'll do is I'll do this. And so that way it doesn't go anywhere.
Shaped thing in the middle of your brain. And that's like Gary Nolan, Pat Price remote viewed you. And he's like, what the fuck? So there's something going on there. And that's like Gary Nolan, has studied a lot of this stuff. Very famously, he's pointed out the caudate putamen in the brain, right? It's like this horseshoe-shaped thing in the middle of your brain. That if he's done MRIs
again, like now he's calling out Gary Nolan, and we find out later that he's not on the website yet, but he publicly states here in the Rogan podcast that he is part of the Soul Foundation. David Grusch is part of the Soul Foundation. And we'll get to why. Greg O'Brien, thanks for the $5. Says, imagine the hog on Grusch. LOL. Chris with a $5 donation says, keep it up, Lou. Also, the Aerotech research guy sucks. I don't know. I think the Aerotech research guy is pretty awesome, man. I think he's putting some good information out there. It rubs people the wrong way, but I think it probably does that because it makes people sort of fight their belief system a little bit. So I do find a lot of his stuff valuable. We'll get into a little bit. I think I have a couple of bookmarks from him, but anyway, let's listen to the rest of this. And again, like Gary Nolan is an immunologist, right? So this sort of theory that Gary Nolan wrote about, which by the way, in his actual paper about this, it had nothing to do. He did not mention anywhere anything about UAP, UFO, or any of those things. So, this whole theory that they pull from this is just something that they talk about outside of the actual scientific paper that was written. None of this stuff is actually mentioned in that paper. It's more referencing schizophrenia and mental illness than it does, people who have been selected, because of this part of their brain that has evolved more for some reason than any other humans out there, and they get they're the special ones. They get to see this and nobody else gets to. So I saw one, so I guess I got a bigger one of these glands in my brain. I guess. I don't know.
Eyes and CAT scans, and I hope I'm not butchering his work. Gary might, slap me later, but it lights up with people who have those kind of skills. They have like an overactive caudate putamen in the brain, and it's like, okay, well, is it a transceiver of some sort? I'm guessing that's the case.
Is it an emerging property of human beings as we evolve?
Exactly, and we're seeing just a few human beings that have
and here's
this stuff.
another thing, because that's the first shot I've seen of Rogan, so it just made me think of it. This was one of the least excited interviews I'd ever seen Rogan do. He barely talks, and this is his show. He's normally way more talkative with his guests and prods way more than he did in this. He looked tired. He looked disinterested. He looked almost like he didn't want to be there. The whole interview is 2 hours and 40 minutes. So I mean, I guess it's a decently long interview. It's not a short interview, but it's not crazy long. Considering this guy is giving the best secret in the world, you would figure Rogan would be a little more amped about it, and he wasn't. He looked kind of hungover. So I don't know if he's actually hungover. I'm going to say no, because usually in November he stays sober, doesn't he? I don't know. I can't remember, but I know one of these months toward the end of the year he stays sober. But I don't know, man. He did not seem interested in Dave Grusch at all, because in a lot of ways, a lot of the questions that Rogan asked got shut down by Dave by saying, I can't really get into it. My classification, national security. I'm a whistleblower, but I can't, I didn't bring my whistle. Sorry. Again, there are little nuggets. There are moments here. We're going to go over those moments where I really think he was genuine. And I'm like, man, if this guy's lying, it's a good show. And again, he might not be lying. It's very easy to consider that he's just got the information wrong. He believes what he's seen and the information that he's put together is right. That is different than him just straight up lying. So, it's just something to think about. But anyway, let's listen to the rest of this clip.
Stuff. And then if it is a transceiver, where's the information? Is it in a higher spatial dimension, or how are they extracting? How are they able to basically be non-locality, right? They're able to like project themselves somehow, their consciousness, to and then this is a declassified example from Stargate, a Russian missile base. Sketch the crane and where the silos are, what the status is. Satellite comes over, takes a picture, and it's exactly the way they sketched it. How'd they do that? Like, it's certainly real because there is a feedback loop. Now, there's a lot of charlatans in the psychic space and all that, but like, at least that government program, and I've talked to
almost every single person that he names in this interview is a charlatan. Or not. With the only exception of Gary Nolan, I don't think any of those other scientists, like Hal Puthoff, Eric Davis, they've worked for the government, but compared to other people in their field, they are not anywhere near the top of their own profession. They're nowhere near the smartest or the best in their own professions. They're not one of the best known scientists in the world. It's not like, Carl Sagan or someone along those lines coming out and saying these things. It's Eric Davis, who the big the big sort of brag about Eric Davis is that he's incapable of telling a lie. That's the word on the street about Eric Davis. That's what we're supposed to take to the bank. So, again, when he names these people, it's like, man, this does not add to the credibility of the things that you're talking about.
Hal Puthoff and people who actually ran that program at SRI for the CIA, then DIA in the Army. And that seems to be in Men Who's Staring at Goats, right? The George Clooney movie's the famous movie based on the Stargate program. Seems to be legit as far as we can measure from a feedback perspective.
What was the explanation for the discontinuation of that program?
Oh, gosh, I'm not a scholar on that.
Oh, now he doesn't know. They ended it because it was bullshit. You know? That's why. That's why. It's funny. Anytime there's like a hard question on these things that he brings up, these are the things that he's using as these good nuggets of information. And then when you ask him about those things, I'm not a scholar on it, man. I think.
Something Russell Targ or Hal Puthoff or one of those guys could explain if it was just like got caught up in the bureaucracy or what. I don't remember.
I don't remember. Yeah. That's wonderfully convenient. Let's see here. Now, Aerotech, I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but you did mention him, and I did bookmark this. But there is something that Aerotech points out about the GS-15 role with National Geospatial Agency, NGA, that Dave Grusch references in this interview, and how he sort of is very proud of the classification and the rank that he held in that classification and rank comes with a big, it's a decent pay. It's at most, I think, $178,000 a year, something like that. Minimum 117, max 152 per year, starting salary. So base pay. Anyway, it's essentially saying that the classification that he's saying he wasn't. And it's actually a big difference in pay from what he's claiming to what he actually was. And some people are like, will say, well, what's the big deal? Who cares? Who gives a shit? Maybe he just misspoke. Maybe he did just misspeak, but it didn't sound like he did because, again, he's almost bragging about that classification. And if he's not that actual classification, it's like, why lie about that little thing? It's if you are lying about it. If it's a genuine mistake, fine. But I don't know, man. It didn't seem like it. So that's something that, somebody pointed out, or Aerotech research at Aerotech_space on Twitter. So if you want to check out their work. So this is another clip. This one was posted thanks to Who is Axelrod, Go Kick Rocks 88 on Twitter. Grusch confirms he was accused of mishandling classified information and was under criminal investigation for a few months, but was eventually cleared. His boss, however, was fired as a show of force and walked out to his car. Who was his boss? And this is a great question, but let's listen to this clip.
Watching right now, but when I really started looking into this, they came after me so hard to try to revoke my clearance, ruin my career, kicked me out of my agency, and they accused me of everything you could possibly think of with no evidence. For example, at first they wanted to say, oh, Dave, you have mental health stuff you didn't report to us.
Wait, okay, what's going on here? So Wise Monkey says he was wrong about this loose stop. He was wrong. What was I wrong about? Oh, okay. Arrow Research made a mistake. Okay. So, well, that's good to know. Aerotech was just Googling that information about GS-15. He doesn't know what Grusch is classified as. Okay. All right. Well, okay. If you guys say so. I know Wise Monkey means well, so, I'll take, if that's the case, then that's the case. All right, here we go.
That may be watching right now, but when I really started looking into this, I mean, they came after me so hard to try to revoke my clearance, ruin my career, kicked me out of my agency, and they accused me of everything you could possibly think of with like no evidence. For example, at first they wanted to say, "Oh, Dave, you have mental health stuff you didn't report to us. We're concerned because we think you might have an ongoing mental health issue." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I reported that I had PTSD from Afghanistan in my military service several years ago, and I sought help for that. Like I'm not ashamed of that. I'm high functioning autistic, and I didn't know that until my early 30s, and how I process trauma I didn't really understand until many years later. And I sought help for that, and they were trying to say that like I had some secret mental health problem that I haven't been reporting to. So I had to go through this whole process. 3 agencies at the same time investigated me for that, which I don't even know if that's like legal. They tried to say that I like mishandled classified, all this other stuff. It was insane. Apparently,
so
I was under criminal investigation.
They're trying to say that I mishandled classified information. And this is the part where people have been speculating, well, is that mishandling of classified information the stuff that Jeremy Corbell's been high noon leaking on his show? Because a lot of people have been sort of hinting at it. I've been hearing this over and over and over in a few different places. So, is that the mishandling of classified data that they're talking about? And again, who was his boss? That would be interesting to know who his boss was that got fired as a show of force. This is now we know where the accusations of administrative terrorism, now we know who was probably doing this, according to, past reports. That would be, what's his name? The guy at the Pentagon that they hated. Somebody in the chat help me out here. I'm going to kick myself in the butt when somebody puts his name in the chat. No, it wasn't Stratton or Nell. It was the guy that was giving basically Lou Elizondo a hard time, and they accused him of sexual harassment within the workplace at the DOD. And so, and that they were also trying to stifle whistleblowers behind the scenes. So, this is maybe one of those examples that we've heard about in the past. So yeah, Gary Reed, that's it. Gary Reed. Thanks, chat. Appreciate it. Simon Fly was the first one there. Appreciate it. Yes. Gary Reed. So, maybe this is some of the retaliation in which they're talking about, but again, we need both sides of the story here. We're just getting one side of the story essentially when it comes to stuff like this. But like, again, he gives little nuggets where he says, I was accused of mishandling classified data. And if, again, that's the case, like, that's a problem. It's a problem.
Finding with no evidence they tried to use against me that I had to spend money to basically litigate and maintain my employment and my clearance, which I did, for the record. I maintained my clearance. I resigned with full accesses. I'm just debriefed now, but I maintained my top secret eligibility, and I left with my own accord. And of course...
and that's another thing that contradicts. He left under his own accord. He retired. He was not forced out. Okay, so let's make that 100% clear, because he says his career was ruined by this. He retired under his own accord. So which one is it? Were you forced out, or did you retire under your own accord? Was your career ruined by these guys, or did you retire on your own terms?
They ruined one of my boss's careers in another agency. They walked him out of the building and revoked his clearance and terminated him as a show of force after they were going after.
So they fired his boss instead of him as a show of force to show him?
after me. And I feel sorry for that certain individual. And they came after coworkers of mine. I can't get into who, what, when, where, and why to protect their identities and their own process.
And again, like, what if these coworkers were retaliated with him? Why wouldn't they publicly come out and say, yes, I was there. I was one of his coworkers that was retaliated. Dave Grusch is telling the truth. Where are those other coworkers? And the guy that's fired, especially, you would think he'd be really pissed and ready to talk. And back up what Dave Grusch is saying. Yeah, I got fired because Dave Grusch was looking into UFOs, man. Where's that guy? Be nice to see and hear from these people. And maybe get some names. He does give some names. We're going to go into those names. And I think this is, again, we'll get there. We'll get there.
So that's what happened to me professionally. And then what happened to me personally was very disturbing. So I have to be very vague about this because ongoing investigation, but I think you'll understand what I'm saying, is they showed my wife and I they can touch me at any time, 2 times. And it was very disturbing.
Here's the
nugget. It was in conjunction with some other people getting a message like that are, let's say, publicly well-known. Some
publicly well-known who've been threatened. Or does that sound familiar?
That aren't publicly well-known.
Some aren't publicly well-known.
And of course, I immediately reported that to, counterintelligence, federal law enforcement, local to me, because
Okay, so he reported it to. Let's listen to that one more time.
Reported that to counterintelligence, federal law enforcement, local to me.
Federal law enforcement local to him.
Because it, wasn't criminal, but it was like a fuck you to me.
Okay, so it wasn't criminal, but it was an F you to him. And again, like people saying he was so eloquent, like this guy cursed so many times throughout this show. Like it's just like a different standard. I forgot to make that point. Like he curses all the time throughout this show. He says shit and fuck all over the place. I don't know if he's doing that to be more relatable. I've never heard him speak like that in any other venue. This is the first time that he's dropping this kind of language in an interview. And I don't know if it's because, he's letting it loose here on the Rogan show and he thinks he's, I don't know. I don't get it. I don't understand. But anyway.
What happened to me personally was very disturbing. So I have to be very vague about this because ongoing investigation, but I think you'll understand what I'm saying.
Here's the nugget again, is who he reported this to. So he reported it to local federal law enforcement, which means this might be able to be FOIA-able to find this police report and get the details of what happened. I don't know. I'm not a FOIA expert. It might even be as easy as a phone call. Who knows? But I encourage investigative journalists or reporters or anybody out there that knows or is good with doing stuff like that. See if maybe we could get a copy of that report. If he reported it to his local police department, just to be safe, that would be interesting. So again, like there's these little nuggets and places that we might be able to look for these claims. Because that's what I want. I want backups to these claims. I want details to these claims. Again, if you're making the biggest claim in the world, I want to know every detail about you. And moreover, I want to know every detail about the claims that you make. That's just what comes with the territory when you're making claims this big.
Showed my wife and I they can touch me at any time, 2 times. And it was very disturbing. It was in conjunction with some other people getting a message like that are, let's say, publicly well-known. Some that aren't publicly well-known. And of course, I immediately reported that to, counterintelligence, federal law enforcement local to me, because it, wasn't criminal, but it was like a fuck you to me. And this was right before I filed my whistleblower complaint. Now, I don't know who did this. Entity who did X, Y, and Z to my wife and I, identity unknown, but it fucking happens. And I provided that documentation to a couple special agents, and I just knew that it was getting serious.
We're going to get later into this sort of what else he says into that clip. But again, like, I think that's something that might be findable. Like, I'd love to get the details on that. Who was the boss that got fired because of what he was doing as a show of force, according to him? Again, these things should be findable. And I think eventually these things will surface. The idea of him either, what happened? Did he send emails and not get responses to Arrow? Or did Arrow send emails to him and he didn't respond back? Like, we need those kinds of answers. Another clip here by Who's Axelrod. Grusch on OSAP's SAP request. And this is everybody sort of applauding him for naming Lockheed Martin. He was only naming Lockheed Martin because Senator Harry Reid did it years ago. He did it years ago. As one of these private companies that might have some of these, you know, exotic alien materials. So, you know, there's this clip here. Let's check this one out.
He said, in terms of seeing the material himself, he said he was denied access.
He's talking about Harry Reid
for years.
And by the way,
decades was his
fair
term.
use. This is fair use. We are educating the public on the videos that we are sharing. This is covered under fair use and allowable by law. Probably should have said that before, but we had the scroll there, so I think we're okay. Anyway, here we go.
Term, and he actually told me on behalf of me, he was going, so he had like a weekly call with President Joe Biden at the time, and he straight up said to me he was going to talk to President Biden about this issue, literally. And then what he was telling me about OSAP, I was like, holy shit, I have like 20 other people that told me this, dude. So the real history, what fucking OSAP was, because I think there's a lot of people
again
out there that think they were looking at ghosts, skinwalker.
They were. They were looking at ghosts. Just go read the George Knapp books that you reference in this same fucking interview. They were looking at werewolves wearing trench coats and smoking cigarettes. They were looking at ghosts and goblins. They were looking at werewolf tracks, bipedal werewolf tracks in the sand. They were, some of the guards were getting wasted every night and just making shit up. This was a $22 million program. And this is what I'm afraid for, is that it's going to be this whole soul foundation that he's going to be a part of. And again, he says it, and we're going to play it, that they're going to petition the government for funds to look at this shit like OSAP. And he's trying to clear the air about OSAP. OSAP was dino beavers. OSAP was portals opening up. Really weird, unprovable bullshit. And a waste of taxpayer money, most importantly. So, you know, I love this idea that he's setting the record straight on, a lot of people thought they were chasing ghosts and goblins. Yeah, they were. And he's talking about Stephen Greenstreet specifically, the piece that Greenstreet did on Skinwalker Ranch. And I know Joe Rogan's been out to Skinwalker Ranch, and his experience out there, he was not impressed by it whatsoever. So when you start propping that stuff up as like legitimate shit to look at, again, this is where you lose credibility, man. This is where you lose it with me, David Grusch. Nobody wants a whistleblower that's talking about skinwalkers at the Pentagon. This idea that, I like, when he gets pressed on things, I don't know the history of it. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. I have a feeling this guy's watching every show. He's listening to every podcast, maybe even this one. I really do. I really, really do. Why? I can only speculate, I can only speculate as to why. It's weird,
Walker
man.
Ranch. Yes. They went to the ranch as a secondary and tertiary objective. But the real reason, so like there's a document that came out a couple years ago through FOIA from the Defense Intelligence Agency. There was this special access program request that Harry Reid, you might have seen this, I think like George Knapp and company have reported on this.
Those guys that I don't know, even
that he
though I
sent
sat
to
at
the
the
Deputy
table
Secretary of
with
Defense
them,
William
ate dinner.
Lynn. And it was asking for one of the most serious saps you can ask for, what they call.
I know that seems like a really stupid minor transgression there, but it's like the way he writes off, like he only knows these people like sort of by, a second hand. He's never met them. He's never interacted with. The way he just writes that off. Yeah, I think it was written by George Knapp and company and those guys. I don't know, maybe. Yes, you do know. Yes, you do know. And you know those guys. We just showed a picture of you sitting down at fucking lunch with George Knapp. Like, it's those little moments drive me nuts and scream to me that you're full of shit. And I want to believe you. Again, you're probably a cool guy. I just don't think you're being honest 100% with this story. And it's those little moments. And people are going to be like, oh, what's the big deal? Whatever. He's just like, it's a big deal, man. Like, it's a big deal. He's trying to paint a picture of himself like he doesn't know anything about this while knowing everything about this.
What they call a bigoted, waived special access program. So waived means it's limited congressional reporting. That is a class of special access programs. And bigoted means it's like by name. And it's like, it was like, you can read the FOIA document. It was like, Harry Reid, James Inhofe, Lou Elizondo, etc. And I'm like, why are you asking
Harry Reid,
for the most
James
serious
Inhofe,
sap?
and Lou Elizondo? Again, the names that you're like believers. UFO John Doe, thank you so much for the $4.99 donation. Good show. Rogan seems disinterested and like, what the hell did I get myself into and have to fill 3 hours of this loony nonsense? It's true, man. Like, he seems completely checked out of this. And I was talking about this last night on Cambion's show. I popped into his the very last hour of his show. He had an open forum there, and so I got to pop in and just sort of shoot the shit there. But yeah, like this idea, that Rogan, when he usually invites his guests out, he has dinner with them the night before, normally. And I think, that sort of sets up, it's like a pre-interview for the main interview. And I have a feeling that at that dinner, he was getting a lot of non-answers like he's giving in this interview. And I think maybe that just disinterested Joe from really just, poking at him. I think he was just sort of facilitating Dave Grusch to just talk. And go and let him sort of speak whatever he wants to talk about. And a lot of this stuff, I mean, and I've listened now twice to this interview. A lot of it's disjointed. It's not very, the picture's not very well painted, I guess. And it's it's almost like, feels like Ashton Forbes in his stupid MH370 video. Like all of this information, some of it's like, oh, that rings true. That kind of rings true. Ooh, that's weird. Ooh, that's spooky. But then you got this obvious, fake, stupid video that is what opens the door to all of this amazing research. And it's just like, we shouldn't have to go past the video. The video is obviously fake. And I feel like this is in that realm. It's not the exact same, but it feels similar where it's like, he's spitting out all of this lore, all of this UFO history, all of this stuff that's not classified, that's not whistleblowing information, that's not gigabytes of data like normal whistleblowers do when they whistleblow. And the fact that this guy is championing, and the Soul Foundation is championing someone to replace Dr. Kirkpatrick that literally prosecuted and and lost in court to antagonizing and harassing a whistleblower. That's who you want to make in charge of the Aero office. It makes no sense whatsoever.
To be created for a program that ostensibly is looking at Skinwalker Ranch and stuff, and it doesn't make any sense. So what really happened there, and Harry Reid, God bless his soul, made this disclosure a couple weeks after we met in the New Yorker, and you can look this up. I think it was like a May 2021 New Yorker story where he says,
I think it was a May 2021 New Yorker story where he says, like, I feel like these are talking points that you want to get across, and you're pretending like you're accessing these things to then spout them. And just like the behavior panel thought when they analyzed your congressional hearing, they felt like you were acting. And coming from an actor, it looks like you're acting. I'm an expert at that. Check out my IMDb. I've got the bona fides. I've got over 25 credits, film credits to my name. So I could comment on this with a professional eye. You're acting. In moments like this, you're acting. When you're pretending, I think it's January 21st, 2021, and it was in the New Yorker. It was paragraph 4, and it said, "Brah." What?
As I knew for decades, and he made this disclosure, not me, so I'm going to say the name of the contractor. Harry Reid said this.
Harry Reid said this.
We knew that Lockheed Martin had this material for decades. I tried to get access and I was denied. And specifically with the Lockheed Martin stuff, he was talking about during the OSAP program. And for the people who are on this program, I submitted this shit to DOPSR, got this cleared, so don't freak out, but I'm telling the truth here.
Whoa, hello there, everyone.
So Lockheed Martin wanted to divest itself from this material at a specific facility that's known to me that I provided to the Inspector General. Like street address, all that shit, right? And the idea was if they...
That's so eloquent. Street address, all that shit, right? Like, yeah. Like, I don't... Wow, man, it's so
made
funny.
a security catcher's mitt for this shit, most serious sap possible. The contractor and the other government customer, which was the Central Intelligence Agency, for that specific Lockheed material. And it was shit that they recovered from like the 50s and stuff. And it was like bits and pieces of like hall structure, shit like that.
Yeah. Just shit. They got this shit from the 50s and then they recovered it and, just a conglomeration of shit. Oh, Harry Reid, they got this thing and then, it was this really cool like classified shit. And man, if you saw this shit, oh my God, it would blow your mind. Like it doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't feel authentic.
So they were going to tech transfer it, and the $21 or $22 million was actually for Bigelow Aerospace to build out, facilities in Las Vegas and material analysis equipment. And I saw the staff meeting slides. I saw the paperwork. Like there's a paperwork trail I've seen on this shit. And I talked to the people involved in this program. And, even Jim Lakatsky, who ran the program, who's a retired DIA officer, PhD in engineering.
Again, another name, Lakatsky. Another guy with a book that looks like a religious handbook to werewolves and dino beavers.
Who made this disclosure in his book, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, page 152 to 153.
I mean, page 152 to 153. Blah. Like, what? You believe this shit, man? It's so... It's so obvious that every one of these names that you mention around you that you rely on as good points of information, good sources of information, have all been proven to be hacks on some level. I mean, just go look at the cover for Skinwalkers at the Pentagon and tell me that's a serious book. Like, it's...
And he also made a disclosure a couple weeks ago, I think it was on Weaponized podcast with Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, where...
You think?
He's like, yeah, we had a whole craft and we broke into the hall and we gained access. And he ran that through the same, security process as I did. And so Jim Lukatsky, who ran this program, is also going on the record that he is aware, personally aware of intact vehicles and everything. But
so they gained access. What does that mean? And by what method did they gain access?
The way he wrote it in his book, I can only infer it sounded forcible. So through some kind of, means, I don't know if it was like CO2 laser or something. I don't actually know how they gained access, but imagine it was not permissive access. They like broke into the damn thing.
So this thing is essentially sealed.
Look at Rogan.
And it's some sort of, what was the shape of this thing?
Lukatsky didn't disclose the shape on this particular vehicle.
So why are you talking
as far as
about
What about the dimensions?
I don't believe he did in his book. But I think it's like chapter 11 in his new book or something. I glanced at it.
Bullshit, you glanced at it. Page 152, chapter 11, paragraph 1, I think somewhere around there. I just glanced at it. I know, again, like I'm making a big deal out of these little lies, but all of these little lies add up, man. All of these moments of acting add up. And they paint a picture of a man who it seems like he's telling the truth, but the truth that he's telling is bad information. It's just a repetition of bad information. And if that is the case, if an intelligence officer of this caliber can be fooled by the information that all of us are aware of that he's referencing in this interview specifically, man, that's not good enough. And that's a really bad look on the United States intelligence community if that is the case. Again, more facts have to come out. I'm willing to wait and see. I'm still leaving the door open for this guy to being honest, and we'll get into why toward the end of this.
But he did make that disclosure on video as well, and I do encourage both the Aero Office, which is the DoD's UAP task force successor, and Congress to ask Dr. James Lukatsky to come in for classified testimony, because the disclosure in his one book that he wrote with Colin Kelleher, George Knapp, and in the second book, well, the guy saying he has close personal knowledge, he needs to go to Congress. So I don't know James Lukatsky, but I do encourage him to be a fact witness. But going back to that transfer with Lockheed, long story short, can't get into all the nuanced details, but basically the CIA said fuck you to DIA and Lockheed, and it was totally killed. So Harry Reid's request to get the material transferred to the OSAP program was totally killed because of bureaucracy and kind of fiefdom stuff. So they used that money, and then they wrote those defense intelligence reference documents, the DIRDs, as a lot of people who's familiar with it listening will know about. And then they did look at Skinwalker Ranch because they thought that studying kind of the more woo-woo phenomenon aspects of this, and I've never been to the ranch, so I've never experienced the ranch for myself, but obviously
he knows all
we
about
both
it.
know a bunch of people that have been to the ranch and have seen some trippy stuff, or at least allege that. They thought that they would be able to gain currency with the program, in this case CIA, to unlock the key for the Lockheed Martin stuff. Which actually, I'll tell you right now, it's like so weird to say that, but I ran that shit through security. To me, it's like an out-of-body experience to talk about that kind of detailed sensitivity, stuff like that. But
Yeah, again, like all of these stories that are being told secondhand, they're not even coming from Lakatsky, but these are the things that he's using to sell his story. To be like, this is why I'm telling the truth. This is why you should listen to me. This is why you should pay attention. Because in James Lakatsky's book, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, page 122, paragraph 3, chapter 11, he said this thing, you know, about blah, 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 blah. It's like, dude, it doesn't work. Like, this shit doesn't work anymore, man. It doesn't work anymore. Like, why can't you name more private entities that are part of the military industrial complex that are hiding this shit? That's what a whistleblower would do. No, he's only repeating shit from what people said 2 years ago. Those are two funny things. We'll get into those if we got time. Here's an interesting quote here too, and this is not profound, and this is something that, you know, like people like UAP James is where I got it from, because I also looked at, you know, what what the believers were saying about this interview, and they were taking clips like this, and this is a, you know, a big deal for them when David Grusch says stuff like this, but they're not really saying anything that profound, and we'll get into why. But let's listen to the clip first.
Are we alone? Well, the answer is we're not alone. And I know that with 100% certainty, which as an intel officer, you never say 100%, but all things pointed toward that with 100% certainty, which as an intel officer, you never say 100%, but all things pointed towards, based on the people I talked to, like Harry Reid, and I use him as an example, but I talked to the highest of the high people you could possibly talk to, if you catch my drift. So
I talk to the highest people, the highest, you know what I'm saying? No, we don't. Who the fuck are you talking about? Who are you talking about? I think old Joe Rogan would have been like, no, I don't know who you're talking about. Can you be more specific? I think if this was Joe Rogan from 10 years ago, he would have jumped all over this guy's stuff, man. I really do. I think Joe Rogan has become so soft on this topic. Maybe because it's such a clickbait one. Like, it's one that gets a lot of clicks and brings in a lot of revenue and eyeballs, and people love the discussion. It's fun. It's interesting to talk about. It's you know, it's something to get you thinking about the real world for, you know, 2.5 hours or however long the interview takes place. You know, I don't think he does this anymore because he's genuinely curious. I really don't, because he's not even asking questions. I mean, here you have the greatest supposed greatest whistleblower of all time giving the biggest secret in the history of mankind, and you could barely talk through this interview. It's weird. And this idea that he knows with 100% certainty that there's extraterrestrial life out in the galaxy? Yeah, no shit. Yeah, it's a it's the Drake equation. It's the Drake equation. Of course, it's an infinite universe. There has to be intelligent life. It's 100% certainty. That's not profound. And Harry Reid has never publicly said anything. He was actually pretty damn careful about labeling what this is. This shouldn't be good enough. This is a really low bar for evidence. And I wouldn't even, I don't even think there is a bar really for this stuff. It's just, trust me, bros. I mean, did you see this? Look at this face when he says this. Look at this, man. Like, look at this.
But I talked to the highest of the high people you could possibly talk to, if you catch my drift. So
it feels like a script, man. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Unless all of them are lying.
Mm-hmm. That's Joe Rogan's response to that. Mm-hmm.
lying and they're covering up something else, which I don't even know what it would be at this point, because the phenomenon is real. It's been going on for thousands of years. People have been seeing.
How does he know that? How does he know that? How do you know it's been going on for thousands of years? Where are you, Rogan? Like, where are you, man? How do you know that? Like, you're telling us this is fact.
Strange things, and not everybody's mass hallucinating. Are we alone? Well, the answer is we're not alone. And I know that with 100%.
Yeah. It's silly, man. All right, so this is, and again, like, I think they're pushing this thing, like Dave Grusch has mentioned, and I'm pretty sure this is the clip that this is where he talks about this, and if not, whatever. But he mentions that, you know, like he keeps saying things like, man, if the Schumer amendment gets through, and let's pray it does, you know, like, it's like this whole thing, it's gonna get through. It's just like the Senator Gillibrand amendment got through when they co-sponsored that one. A couple of things changed here and there, but it's introduced into the National Defense Authorization Act. Trust me when I tell you, it's gonna pass. The National Defense Authorization Act gets approved every year, no matter what is going on in government, no matter what. It might change verbiage a little bit, like it did a couple of years back when the Gillibrand amendment went through. But this is going to go through. So this idea that they're putting it out there as if it's like, oh man, you better call your lawmakers and ask them to make sure this gets put into the NDAA, so that way we can get more transparency and get this panel to study. That's going to study a presidential panel that's going to study UFOs, and Lord knows that they're going to petition the people who should sit on this panel, of course. They're going to have suggestions, just like Carl Nell, their suggestion to take over Arrow, even though he hates whistleblowers. It's wild. So I can't wait to see when this NDAA does pass, and it will pass. They're going to get super excited about it. It's going to be something that was so obvious that was going to pass. Again, because it's going to be almost 3,000 page bill. It's going to be enormous. It's maybe even larger than that. I can't remember how large the last NDAA was, but it's a massive bill that not every lawmaker is going to go through every single provision and every single bill that is proposed in this. There are sticking points. There are major points where they debate and they talk about and they meet in the middle on. But that's a handful of things. The rest of the Authorization Act just gets thrown in with those things. And that's how laws get passed. And that's how amendments get passed. And that's what's going to happen with the Schumer amendment. We will get it next year. But again, look forward to this year. And this is something that Kirkpatrick said at the conference that they just did at the Hayden Center. And which, by the way, was a conference that anyone could attend. Anyone could ask questions. It wasn't behind closed doors, and it wasn't a bunch of trust me bros. But we are going to get, before the end of this year, a report from Arrow, a part 2-part report about the reverse engineering program that has been alleged by these whistleblowers and what they found based off of the information that they put forward. There's a 2-part to this report. That first part is going to be released before Kirkpatrick retires. Why is nobody getting excited about that? Where's UFO Twitter's excitement for that one? Like, that should be a big one, right? We begged for this office. We got the office. You know, it's here. We might as well look at the information they provide. See what happens. But this Schumer amendment is a way for these UFO believers to get another UFO office or congregation going outside of Arrow. They don't trust Arrow because Arrow doesn't sit above the Department of Defense. So therefore they think that it can't get access to the things that it should be able to get access to. One of the things he mentions, the Department of Energy, UAP Mike. Now it's not me, it's your homeboy Grusch that's saying the Department of Energy is a place that we should be looking into. I happen to agree with him on that one. I'd love to see the toys in there, but let's see. Let's listen to this clip.
And there's still the bottleneck with these military.
Oh, this is the one clip that sounds kind of weird, so I apologize.
That allegedly have access to these things. Yeah, and like to those guys, and I know some of them, and the individuals that hold the keys, like this is a boon. Like this is, don't look at it like you're going to lose money. This is a recruiting opportunity. Yes, you're going to have to let other people in the cookie jar. That's how a fair and free society works, and they should be able to compete for work. And because that was one of the main, I talked to some individuals that were in an informal session for a previous administration on should we disclose or not for a certain former president, and really insightful what they told me. And one of the biggest impasses to disclosure wasn't the ontological shock from a socioeconomic or theological perspective. It was, well, there's some white collar crime. We violated the federal acquisition regulations. We sole sourced this work to some big companies for decades. Contractors are going to litigate this to the Supreme Court, saying they lost billions of projected income because they didn't get the bid on the work.
This is so dumb.
It's going to be this like.
So again, like this idea of a reconciliation process, that is sort of a forgiveness for all of the abuses of hiding this UFO tech. Would, you know, they would open the U.S. government up to all of this litigation, and these aerospace tech companies would be suing the government as well because they didn't get access to this technology first, because they've got working contracts with the government, and yada 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 yada, and all of the people that they fired and all the people they hurt, and they use this apartheid example of, you know, after the African apartheid, you know, all of the people who did these atrocities came to a tribunal, and in that tribunal they decided that some of these atrocities must be forgiven so that way the community can move forward. And so that's what he's suggesting here, is that, you know, all of like the Paul Benowitzes that killed themselves because of the manipulation from the government, all of the people who have been, you know, Melinda Leslie, a person like Melinda Leslie will say, well, what about my labs? They kidnapped me, you know, like I should be able to sue the government for my labs. So it's going to open up just a whole bunch of can of worms. And so they want to be able to put a provision in place where it's like, look, if we're going to share this information, nobody could turn around and sue us. Right. So that's essentially what he's saying here. And it's silly because at the same time he's saying that Lockheed Martin and all of these guys already got this technology. They've already reverse engineered some of it. So again, like it's like, which one is it?
Disaster for the U.S. government, and the problem with that is like I understand that, but like that's why you need to have a truth and reconciliation process. It's almost like the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in post-apartheid South Africa, where people who committed like murder came in and was like, this is what happened, here you go, and you know they don't get convicted of those crimes. And I'm not saying, I mean, people who've committed murder as it relates to this subject, okay, we should probably hold them accountable, but for some of this stuff there needs to be a process where we kind of mitigate some of those unfortunate legal issues. But that was one of the main issues a certain group for a reasonably recent administration came up with and advised that president, hey, look, there's going to be a lot of Supreme Court stuff. Let's not be that guy. So it's like that's the barrier. That's the reason. Come on.
Wild, man. All right, let's see what this clip's got here.
But really, if the U.S. government doesn't get their house in order here, I mean, you could have uncontrolled disclosure events such that either maybe the non-human intelligence is like, yeah, let's do it. Or what if one of our...
This is so funny. He's saying the aliens will be like, all right, you know what? Fuck it. They're not going to do it. We'll do it. And we'll just show ourselves. And this is another reason why I say this disclosure is so stupid. And he mentions it right here. And it's this idea that another country is going to disclose this first and beat us to the punch, and how that would make us look internationally. Like, I'm telling you right now, if China had this, if Russia had any of this kind of technology, I think the best thing they would do is tell the world that they had it and that they were the ones that were first to the table to be honest with the world that this stuff exists. What country would not want to do that and beat the United States to the punch on this? The United States doesn't get to decide what countries get to disclose about their UFO information. That's not the way that stuff works. So if this is real, if other countries, I imagine it's, you know, according to David Grusch, these things have been crashing and have been here for thousands of years. So you would think Russia has a couple of them, especially considering their land mass is infinitely bigger than the United States. Same with Asia and Africa, for God's sakes. Like all of these massive continents, where are all of the crashes there? So again, like he's providing an argument that it doesn't hold any water here.
Our adversaries decides to disclose and they become the Messiah figure on this, and we lose sovereignty or national supremacy in that regard from an open and honest civil society perspective. But I think the governments, we're getting close, I think, as
we're
long as...
We're certainly closer than we've ever been
yeah,
before.
Yeah.
Just the fact that they brought you in to have these conversations.
Yeah, no, I'm still advising the U.S. government on this, and I'm trying to carefully message this, put all the broad...
He's still advising the U.S. government on this without a security clearance, which means he's doing it through the Soul Foundation. And he's doing it also through, I guess, meetings, failed skiff meetings that were supposed to happen but didn't happen yet. Again, like, it just seems like the importance of this has been put on a back burner. Nobody wants to buy him a plane ticket. Nobody wants to put him up in a hotel. You know, his really important, groundbreaking skiff meetings about the most important information in the whole history of mankind get canceled. Like it's a shit show.
Things on the table, and I'm not trying to be coy, I'm not trying to conceal anything, but it's like there's real national security and collateral damage with just releasing this willy-nilly, and I'm just trying to get the government to get a plan together here and just be open and honest with the people of the world, really. So,
and there's still the bottleneck with these military contractors that allegedly have access to these things.
Yeah, and like to those guys, and I know some of them, and the individuals that hold the keys, like this is a boon. Like this is, don't look at it like you're going to lose money. This is a recruiting opportunity. Yes, you're going to have to let other people in the cookie jar. That's how a fair and free society works.
It's so interesting. Yeah, 151 people watching. That's pretty awesome. Thanks, guys. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. I think this is one of the largest audience we've had in a while, so thanks for being here. All right, let's check out this next clip. This is him ripping on Mike Turner, and we're going to get into this here because this kind of irked me. This is where the part that kind of pissed me off, because it's like this guy not okay, this guy okay, even though both of them are not great lawmakers in their own respects. But let's get into it. Lord Ludacris, thank you for the $1.99 chat donation. Glad to see your numbers back up. You deserve it. Oh, thanks, man. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, you know, if you build it, they will come. Here we go.
The Senate already passed it. They're chill with this. This is like, we're good to go. But there's pushback in the House right now that is, you know, pardon my language, fucking ridiculous. So they're saying, for one, it's duplicating the DoD Aero's office activities. They're doing good things. They're looking at UAP reports, trying to figure out what's balloons and air trash and what's weird stuff. And of course, they are doing an historical review to try to understand the U.S.'s history on this too. But the problem is with that agency, it's within the DoD and IC, not above. So you have an issue reaching into Department of Energy, other, you know, cabinet level agencies. So you need a presidential level panel that can declassify stuff, reach into other agencies and tell, you know, certain secretaries, we're coming in, we want your stuff under presidential authority. So what's happening in the House, from what I'm told from people on the Hill that are working the issue right now, you have the chair of the House Intel Committee, Mike Turner, who's blocking this, from Ohio, Dayton, Ohio area, right, Pat? Weird.
Word.
And
Right, Pat, meaning right,
It's
Pat.
not that weird. Lawmakers have donators and donations from the military industrial complex everywhere. Almost every single lawmaker, especially the lawmakers that sit on the security committees that deal with all of these companies, like, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, list goes on and on and on and on and on.
Patterson Air
yes,
Force.
yeah. And Mike Rogers, which I'm kind of surprised, from Alabama, who's the chair of the House Armed Services Committee. So I have a problem with Mike and Mike right now. So Mike Turner, now remember, I
wonder, again, remember just a few weeks ago, the channels and the people that were screaming at Mike and Mike here, that were asking for them to be taken off committees. Where do you think they were told that information? Who do you think told them to say that? Because literally what he's saying here verbatim is the same shit Matt Ford was saying. It's the same shit, UAP Mike, and it's the same shit that Liberation Times and Jeremy Corbell and all of these guys were spitting to attack and go after these lawmakers because they're trying to block this historic amendment. It's not going to get blocked. It's going to pass. And the hate that they drum up for these lawmakers is insane. And I think it honestly, it hurts your chances of this stuff being taken legitimately. It really does. I think these staffers and these lawmakers are honestly getting scared by you guys. Like, a lot of you guys creep these lawmakers out, and you're creeping out the scientists, and you're creeping out everybody. And they're like, this shit ain't worth it. And I think a lot of them have started distancing themselves from this discussion. And if this amendment does not pass, that's why. Because the amount of crazy pushback that they've received, especially since the Aero office has been created, and the amount of people that have been harassed, staffers, lawmakers, family members of those people, scientists, Department of Defense employees, NASA employees, and again, their family members. Like, the lawmakers and NASA and all of these people, I have a feeling are gonna be like, fuck this ain't worth it. Like, it's just not. There's nothing here. We've pretty much looked, and every time we do put out the data, the facts, we get torn apart and our families get harassed. And every time as a lawmaker, I don't give them exactly what they asked for. Like when Carl Nell doesn't get made into the the new Aero director, Senator Gillibrand's going to get an earful from crazy people. And again, like, I think that's going to discourage lawmakers from really championing this stuff for you guys, because you're coming at them with a lot of crazy shit. UFO John Doe with a $4.99 donation says, you and Cambion should seriously do a UFO conference tour and interview folks after they attended. It would be straight fire. That would be great. Yeah, if anybody wants to produce that and get us a budget, that sounds fun. I would love to do that. But those damn UFO conferences are expensive, man. But yeah, so let's see what else he says.
Go and pull up his PAC donors. Who are his big? Tell me, Mike. Have you ever been in Intel office? So I have a problem with Mike and Mike right now.
Listen to this.
So Mike Turner. Now
Wonder
remember,
where all this hate came from. Here it is.
Went to his committee in December of last year. He wasn't there, but his staff and lawyers were. And of course, he goes on Fox Business after the hearing, doesn't use my names like this whistleblower. He has no idea what he's talking about. I'm like, really? Tell me, Mike. Have you ever been an Intel officer or served in the military? Oh, wait, you've been the mayor of Dayton, Ohio. You were voted most corrupt person in Congress.
And he's also a senator that happens to sit on the most powerful committee with the most access to the information that you're claiming to be true. He happens to head that committee. So, yeah, I think he would have an idea. Just because he hasn't been an officer.
A couple years ago, and pull up his PAC donors. Who are his biggest donors? Lockheed, Raytheon, Boeing. Okay,
So what? So what?
And first of all, if you thought
That's a problem with a lot of lawmakers. And if we're talking about getting rid of Citizens United, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. Let's do it. Call your lawmakers. Tell them to get rid of Citizens United. To tell them that we no longer want corporations to be able to donate to presidential campaigns. I'm all for that, Dave Grusch. Let's do it. But let's not single out one lawmaker just because they're not going with what you want to happen.
to your committee. So, and furthermore, besides blocking the bill, I'm sure you're first of all, if you thought you needed his PAC donors, who are his biggest donors? Lockheed, Raytheon, Boeing. Okay. So, and first of all, if you thought you needed more information or wanted to talk to me personally, why didn't you call me back when I reported to your committee?
This is the part. Looks like he's telling the truth. Like he's pissed off that he didn't get a call back. And if they didn't call him back, if that's true, that's unacceptable. Even if you think his information is wrong, you should have called him back and said, hey, I think you're wrong, and here's why. If you want to have a classified briefing as to why I think you're wrong or why you're being misled, I think that is imperative on a lawmaker to set that record straight, especially if you have the information. If you're ignoring him and letting him flap in the wind and say these things publicly just to make an example of him, that is bullshit. And I'm behind Grusch on that one. That's ridiculous. He's a veteran. He served his country. He thinks he's seeing something crazy and he's trying to report it the right way, and you're not calling him back. That's bullshit. I'm sorry. That's bullshit. And that moment right there, I see that moment. Those are the moments where I'm like, shit, man, maybe this guy is being honest. He's definitely being honest about his intention behind the things he's saying. I don't think he's lying. And it's moments like this where I don't think he's lying. But when he's accessing that kind of information, like he's pretending not to know about this to sort of, because I think he doesn't want to be thought as crazy, even though the information, a lot of the information he's relying on is coming from fucking crazy people. It's like he's trying to distance himself from the information he's giving. It's really weird. But in moments like this, where he's talking about how a lawmaker didn't get in contact with him, and it pisses him off. Like you can see how angry he is. And I'll be honest with you, I'm pissed off for him. Like if that is true, which I do think that part of it is he's being honest here. I think that's unacceptable. And it goes the same for Sean Kirkpatrick. If Sean Kirkpatrick did not reach out to this guy, if they did not interview him, if they did not ask him questions and look into his claims, same thing with Susan Goff. And trust me, these facts will come out. Time. All we need is just some more time. And these facts eventually will bubble to the surface and either validate parts of what Grusch is saying or invalidate parts of what Grusch is saying. But what I'm telling you is I'm open to him genuinely thinking this is real and maybe just being mistaken. But the idea that if that is the case and lawmakers know that's the case, they should have pulled him to the side and said, hey, listen, before you make an absolute ass out of yourself, here's why I think you're wrong. Thank you for your service. Have a nice day. What you do with the information after that meeting is on you. So again, we'll get to the bottom of those moments. But if that is the case, again, like those are the moments where I'm like, man, that's not cool. Like, it's not cool. It's not cool. So, all right, let's see. What else? We did that one. We did that one. We did that one. All right. So this is an interesting moment here where he's basically saying, like, there's no plan. there's no plan to any of this stuff. And in a way, I kind of feel like that's true. And a lot of this is fly by the seat sort of policy making. And I think not Dave Grusch, but people around Dave Grusch know that this is rushed, not very well thought out policy making. And I think they're positioning themselves with their foundations to take advantage of wasteful government spending on their foundations to look at a new version of werewolves smoking in trench coats.
But there's never been a disclosure plan. I always ask that, like, to these super senior people I talked to. Was there a plan? Any kind of plan at all? And they're like, no, never. We tried to muddy the waters back and there, tried to put it out there and test the populace, but, there was never any cogent plan. I mean, people think the government is like this fine-oiled machine. They have plans for everything. Well, I guess sort of, but like, it's not. But there's never been a disclosure plan.
So that's just an interesting little moment. Okay, so this is also an interesting moment, and this is one of the, I think, the best question maybe that Rogan asked. So let's get into this moment, and then we'll get into our very last moment where I think this is, again, like a moment where I think Dave Grusch is being honest and earnest, and again, if he's telling the truth in this instance, like, the Department of Defense has a lot of fucking questions to answer for when it comes to this guy specifically. But we'll see what happens. All right, here we go.
As it stands right now, what's the future for this stuff? What's the future for these disclosures and what are the bottlenecks?
Well, I mean, certainly from the governmental process, as long as the House doesn't kill this Schumer amendment, and that's why I'm discussing it here with you, because if they don't pass it, it's going to be the greatest setback to humankind in U.S. history, literally.
I hope it passes. And here's the thing. If it passes, which I think it will, again, I already explained why. Just a massive bill, getting stuff with shit that not all lawmakers are reading. And this is an amendment proposed by House Leader Chuck Schumer. So I think it's going to go through. I hope this goes through. And when it does, and this panel is put together, all I'm going to say, just like I said when Arrow was put together, is, look, we screamed for this. We asked for this. Now we have to accept the results that they put on the table, no matter what, especially if they're following where the data leads. And if the data leads to not being alien or non-human intelligence or whatever you want to label it, you can't get pissed now because this guy asked for it. Just like Elizondo was asking for the Arrow office and Mellon was asking for the Arrow office. They got the office and then they immediately started bitching about who was in the office and how it wasn't good enough and how they didn't believe enough. And so all I'm saying is, be careful what you ask for. I hope this passes. I really do.
The greatest setback to humankind in U.S. history, literally.
It would be the greatest setback in humankind, according to David Grusch, if this amendment doesn't pass. The greatest setback to humankind.
So the presidential panel gets impaneled about 90 days or so after the passage of the bill. So by Christmas, as long as it doesn't get killed, will be in the National Defense Authorization Act. Panel will be formed, say February, March. Then they have a 300-day process to develop a initial plan for the president. And I don't know if Chuck Schumer and his staff are being kind of crafty or whatever, but the 300 days, if you actually do it out, it's like the election. So I don't know if they want to make it an election issue, which certainly if this act doesn't pass, I think it needs to be an election issue because the senior executive needs.
Can you imagine Trump and Biden debating this issue? I don't see anything good coming out of that. And honestly, I think it would set back the discussion so far, especially with what's happened. If the election was today, or if debates were today, bringing up this topic in the climate that's happening right now would be so insensitive and so out of place in a presidential forum. And I think a lot of people would get pissed off at that question today, right now, if that question made it into a presidential debate. So again, be careful what you ask for.
Needs to rule on this if Congress can't get their shit together, to be quite honest. And we have a plan out to 2030 where this stuff starts getting rolled out. Knock on wood, perfect storm, things could get delayed.
It's like they already know. They said October 2030. October of 2030 is when this stuff's going to start rolling out, according to David Grusch, the Soul Foundation, Gary Nolan, and the other third guy, whoever the hell it is. And there's more members on this board. I have a feeling they were behind the closed doors at this weekend's conference. It just, again, like these people around him, they just, it doesn't add up to transparency, clarity, rationality, honesty. It doesn't add up to any of that stuff. It doesn't.
But then in parallel, and that's kind of why I helped found the Soul Foundation with Gary Nolan and Dr. Peter Skafish, who's an anthropologist as well, is we wanted to figure out the STEM outreach. We wanted to figure out the public policy, national policy to advise the U.S. and its allies on this.
They want to figure out the policy for the United States. These guys. Why? Why? You guys are not policymakers. And where are you going to get the money to start this policy making? Who's going to fund this? Who's going to fund this effort? Let me guess. This dickhead. And you dickheads. And guess who they're going to be beholden to with that information? Ain't going to be you. And sure as hell ain't going to be me. So, I'm sorry, but like
out the step parallel, and that's kind of why
moments like this is where I don't trust you. And like I'm like bullshit alarms going off like crazy right now. It's really frustrating.
I helped found the Soul Foundation with Gary Nolan and Dr. Peter Skafish, who's an anthropologist as well, is we wanted to figure out the STEM outreach. We wanted to figure out the public policy, national policy to advise the U.S. and its allies on this issue, and we're happy. Like I said, I'm not here to slap the government in its entirety and admonish everybody. Like, I think there needs to be a truth and reconciliation process, but I think our foundation, we want to be like, okay, well, bring us in as a think tank if, based on my experience and experience of my colleagues, like you have an issue with X, well, let's figure out how to roll this out and how to,
just give us
incentivize the National Science Foundation to look in this, make this like, it's dual use, right? You might.
Yeah, it's just a huge red flag. It's a huge red flag. And again, this is him essentially pitching investors through a major platform. This is him putting his platform, his foundation on a major, major podcast platform. How many people are going to go now Google the Soul Foundation and donate to the Soul Foundation and support the Soul Foundation? Even though they just held a closed meeting where only UFO celebrities and orb seers now were invited. So there's one more clip here. We got 20 minutes left. This was the clip where honestly, outside of actual whistleblowing, David Grusch, I think this is what you should lead with almost every time. You know, this is the part where I was like, man, if he is acting, if he is lying, he is a really good actor in this moment, and this is the hardest part of the act. This is the hardest part of the act. I did not get the vibe that he was acting in this moment at all. I got the vibe that he was very much being earnest and sincere in this moment. I looked up, we finally got some names in regard to his PTSD claims, which opened my eyes to, okay, maybe this guy was in a situation where he saw a friend blown up in front of him, and that affected him tremendously. But this is the first time we've gotten this detail. So let's listen to what he has to say. And then we're going to look, I'm going to show you what I found. And I think we can not validate, but we can safely, carefully trust that what David Grusch is saying here is true. And this is the first time I've ever seen information that made me go, okay, now that's very interesting. Because now if that's true, that now I can logically look at the other behaviors and the other things that happen in his life and say, okay, now that makes sense. Now there's context to that behavior, and I can't take that behavior and immediately, there's more information with the behavior. Okay, so if there's more information, that means that we have to maybe change our opinion a little bit about what that information is saying. So let's go over it. Let's listen to what he has to say, and then we'll talk about it.
Happening to me, no kidding. And I knew I needed to do something internally. And then when I saw the writing on the wall earlier this year, and of course I knew about the Schumer Amendment, like I mentioned earlier, and I knew, I'm like, you know, I got to do this for my own protection, because me leaving the federal service, because I resigned my Air Force commission, I totally threw that career away to do what I thought was the right and patriotic thing, to whistleblow on this, you know, and I, you know, swore my oath 18 years ago, and that sounds hokey, but I believe, you know, integrity first, service before self, and excellence all we do. That's the Air Force motto. And I'm like, this is not.
I believe him when he says that. I mean, honestly, like, there's nothing more selfless than volunteering to be in the military. And I think when these men and women take their oaths, I think they take them insanely seriously. I really do. And to break those oaths, or to put that integrity on the line, I think takes a lot of convincing, or a lot of belief in what you're thinking is true. So when he says something like that, like, to me, it's the most human so far. Everything that I've seen on tape from this guy.
Not going to help me personally. Like, love talking to you. I like spreading this message because it's the right and ethical thing to do, but this is a nightmare for me. I don't want to be public.
I don't not believe that. His life has been torn apart by people like me, by other journalists. Although he hasn't, I don't think he's faced the real fire yet. And that's not an opinion, that's a fact. You haven't done the 60 Minutes. You haven't done the New Yorker interview. You haven't done the in-depth, you know, front page, cover issue, you know, 20, 30, 40, 50 page article on your life that details everything about who you are, who your family is, where you came from. Like the normal things that I would expect a person with these big claims to do. And maybe those things are coming. but we haven't seen them yet. I'm sorry. The Yes Theory and Joe Rogan Experience are not credible enough for me to believe what you're saying is true. The Debrief is not credible enough for me to rely on their reporting to believe what you are saying is true. I need better, Dave Grusch. And moments like this, I think, is where you're really valuable. And I think if you could stick to the actual whistleblowing and your experience as a soldier and as someone who served their country, I think that's where you're going to win your biggest fans. I think where you lose people is all of the facts that you bring to the table. They're not facts. We're just getting a history lesson from you. And all of the people around you are shady, man. They are not open-minded. They shun objectivity. They shun questioning. They welcome groupthink. They do not like when you question their authority. And I'm sorry, this conversation has no room for that kind of bullshit. Everyone should be able to come to the table and express their opinion or ask a fucking question. Nothing should be done behind closed doors. Nothing when it comes to this should be done behind closed doors if it's real.
I've served the country in clandestine and covert operations for 14 years. I've done technical intelligence for some of the most high-profile takedowns in U.S. history. I shouldn't even be here, but I am because I want to see change. I saw something unethical and unmoral. I want to make sure I hold that element of the government accountable. And it was the right fucking thing to do. And I get kind of emotional about that because, my career's been service and sacrifice. And, I had 2 friends of mine die, and I've talked about this publicly before. And I'm segueing a little bit, but the suffering of the American intelligence officer is something that, for their service of their country, and I'm not talking about this subject, obviously, people don't realize the kind of trauma intel professionals go through. So, first of all, I had a friend
I believe him when he says that. I believe it. And I'll show you why.
months after I got back from Afghanistan. His name is Captain Dave Lyon. There's a park in Peterson Space Force Base named after him. I remember seeing his coffin come off the plane and stuff. So,
this is genuinely affecting him. David Lyon. So, I mean, it even gets me emotional. Like, I feel bad for him. I genuinely do. So I did some simple research on David Lyon. And so he's an Air Force officer, former Academy athlete killed in Afghanistan. Colorado Springs. That's where Dave Grusch lives, right? So this was published January 2nd of 2014. Okay, so this happened in 2014. So this is, I'm interested to see, again, like the time frames, how these things line up. But listen to this story. So Colorado Springs, Colorado, former Air Force thrower captain David Lissy Lyon was killed on December 27th while conducting combat operations near Kabul, Afghanistan. Lyon, a 2008 Academy graduate, was a 3-year letter winner for the Falcons track and field team and the Mountain West champion in the shot put. A member of the 21st Logistics Readiness Squadron at Peterson Air Force Base, Lyon was killed when a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device was detonated near his convoy. He was one of 10 killed in the attack, along with 2 NATO military personnel and 7 Afghan forces. Serving a year-long deployment to Afghanistan, Lyon was performing a combat advisory mission with Afghan National Army commandos and working with the Combined Joint Special Operations Task Force of Afghanistan. He was scheduled to return to Peterson Air Force Base in February. Known as Lion Lissy during his time with the Falcons track and field program, the native of Sandpoint, Idaho, served as a team captain during the 2007-2008 season, where earning a conference title in the shot put in the 2008 Mountain West Indoor Championships. He is still ranked third on the Academy's all-time list in both the indoor and outdoor shot put, highlighted by a throw of 57 feet and 11 inches during the 2008 indoor season. A receipt of the track and field program's Laura Piper Ironman Award, named after the 1991 Academy graduate and Air Force thrower who was killed in action during Operation Desert Shield in Iraq. Lion was named to the National Strength and Conditioning Association All-American team, which recognizes excellence in strength and training. My memories of Dave are not how far he threw or any honors he received, but of his character and leadership, Air Force track and field head coach Ralph Lidman said. A fearless and intense competitor, Dave was one of the nicest young men I could ever remember coaching in my 24 years of the USAFA. He cared deeply about his team and his teammates. Dave was entirely selfless, always willing to share his time, energy, experience, and expertise with his teammates. For that very reason, he was one of the most outstanding team captains we'd ever have during my tenure. Dave was the epitome of a warrior and a winner. Lion, who changed his last name after graduation with respect to his adopted parents, is survived by his wife, Dana Pounds Lion, a 2006 Army graduate and two-time NCAA champion at the javelin throw. That guy had a cool life. And that was his friend. And the thing that stuck out to me, other than an amazing life, was this part right here. A member of the 21st Logistics Readiness Squadron at Peterson Air Force Base, Lion was killed when a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device was detonated near his convoy. A convoy is a big group of trucks and people moving somewhere. And guess who could have easily been in that convoy? David Grusch. And if he saw one of his best friends and teammates shredded to pieces in front of him, and along with 10 other people or 9 other people, like, yeah. That's heavy shit. And, you know, it's details like that when you're telling a story this big, man, you really should have come out with a long time ago. Because your title suggests that you weren't on the front lines. But when you get context like this, you say, okay, now I can see how he could suffer for something like that. You know, and I'm not going to apologize for wanting to know this information. This adds context, man. This makes it it hits different now. I'm not becoming a softie, and it's relevant. It's relevant, you know, because when he's recovering from that mental illness and he's behaving outside of his normal behavior, this explains why. And I think with this context, you know, it doesn't just make him sound like a crazy person anymore that isn't being honest about his service record. Now, again, this doesn't mean he's telling the truth. This doesn't mean he was in this convoy. But he gave you the name. And then you get the details of that name. And I don't think anybody denies that Dave Grusch served in Afghanistan. I believe that. And again, he's going to have to get from one place to another. So convoys is part of his routine while he's there serving our country. Like, it matters. Those details matter. I'm not going soft. This doesn't mean I believe him, you know, but this is context. And again, like, if If lawmakers are not getting in contact with him, I'm sorry, even if he's mistaken or even if he's lying, lawmakers, that means they should want to talk to him even more. They shouldn't be ignoring him. And when we hear about stories, you know, about him dealing with this trauma in probably not the best ways, again, with this context, I can't take that incident and then just, you know, paint the whole story with that one incident and immediately go, okay, well, all this must be no good anymore. Because we didn't have the context of where the PTSD came from. Now I think we kind of do. You know, again, it just paints a deeper, bigger picture. And when all of these facts do come out, then we'll talk about it again and we'll see where we sit. And if Dave Grusch is being honest, then if that's where the data leads, that's where I will go. But right now it does not. Even with this story, it still doesn't lead to where David Grusch's claims are going. They don't. And until they do, I'm still going to press his feet to the fucking fire as hard as I can. And I would suggest to David Grusch or whoever his team is, stop doing the Yes Theory show. Stop referencing it as some sort of big thing that you did. Stop doing News Nation. Stop doing interviews with Ross Coulthart. Stop associating with all of these people that you named in this interview. Start actually bringing some facts to the table that would classify you as an actual whistleblower. And then maybe I could start changing my tune on you. But what do you give a shit about what I think? You don't care. You don't care. And yeah, I'm a nobody. But that would be my suggestion. That's what I would do if I was part of the Dave Grusch team. I would lead with these stories with details. If you're going to tell these stories, give us details, because when you do, it adds some really nice context and it humanizes you in such a great way. But you undermine all of that with everything else that you're bringing to the table. And I guess what I'm saying is this story might be salvageable, especially if there's truth to it. But if there's no truth to it, I don't think we're going to get past any of the details that we have right now. And I think 2030 is just a moving of the goalposts. And when we get to 2030, I promise you that goalpost will be moved again. And again, the part that's absolutely boggling my mind is the cheering, the flute playing, the championing of we just went 7 more years. We just added 7 years onto this fucking thing. 7 years. And we're playing fucking flutes. We're arms around reporters who are hiding the whereabouts of a craft so big it can't be moved. Calling for the dereliction of duty of generals on bases, harassing lawmakers. This is your pile of dirt. This is as good as you're going to get right now. The Joe Rogan Experience. That's as legitimate as you're going to get. Before it was the Yes Theory, now it's the Joe Rogan Experience. And yeah, you got a lot of clicks, you got a lot of interest. I'm sure you're reaching the people you actually want to reach, which is investors and lawmakers and tastemakers and hopefully influence to help you get the things that you're seeking with these foundations, which is money. Lots and lots and lots and lots of money. Let's listen to Matt Ford talk about how he now sees orbs. It's hilarious. It's hilarious. This guy went from a political action committee that spoke out against Trump to full-blown UFO believer, propaganda mouthpiece, and supporter of Tim Burchett, which, by the way, that was one thing I wanted before we get to Matt Ford. I wanted to talk about Tim Burchett because there was this whole thing brought up about how Mike Rogers was one of the most corrupt lawmakers in Washington. This is an article written by Knox News from Tennessee. It's his local newspaper. And they wrote a piece about Tim Burchett just this October. Just last month. So Congressman Tim Burchett is no longer likable. Down to earth, funny person. He was a state senator and county mayor. He has become Florida Rep Matt Gaetz's best teammate, and he seldom asks folks in Tennessee how he should vote. Burchett voted October 3rd with the 7 other Republicans to oust U.S. Representative Kevin McCarthy as House Speaker. The other 210 Republicans voted to keep McCarthy, but Burchett joined all the Democrats and leapt into the unknown. It brought the House to a total stop while wars were raging in the Middle East and Ukraine. There also could have been a government shutdown in late November that will leave border guards and military service members without pay. Remember that 10 months ago, in January, Burchett voted 15 times to elevate McCarthy to the speakership. McCarthy even came to Knoxville to raise money for Burchett's campaign. What's changed? Not only did Burchett ally himself with a narcissistic nihilist Gaetz, but he also has now isolated himself from almost all 435 members of Congress who want nothing to do with him. The 200 plus Democrats are not his friends, and the other 210 Republicans who backed McCarthy view him as unreliable, inconsistent, and someone to avoid. He cannot get co-sponsors on legislation. Our district has a congressman whose effectiveness has been neutered by both parties. What Tim Burchett's vote to oust McCarthy as speaker could mean for his political future in terms of accomplishing anything, our district is no longer adequately represented. His ability to pass legislation is limited or non-existent. Burchett tries to make amends, even offering to be expelled from the House GOP caucus or censured if it would unite the party around Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio as speaker. This is the guy that Matt Ford, the Democratic Political Action Committee guy, loves this dude. How ridiculous that the damage has been done. He already abandoned 95% of the House GOP when he voted to oust McCarthy, and many didn't even believe the sincerity of the offer, seeing it as only a ploy to one of their preferred people in the speaker's role. If you read Burchett's email, listen to this. If you read Burchett's emails, where'd it go? Wow. Okay, yeah, here it is. If you read Burchett's emails raising campaign funds, they are often ugly, mean, and personal attacks on Joe Biden, members of Biden's cabinet, and other leading Democrats. I consider them embarrassing in their own tone. I often disagree with Biden, but I do not respond with personal attacks on him like former President Donald Trump and Burchett do. Burchett never did this in the legislature or as mayor. He was not that type of person. He disagreed with former school superintendent Jim McIntyre while being agreeable. He engaged in civil discourse. Not anymore. No longer. He was even one of only 40 House members to vote against the anti-Asian discrimination legislation, which more than 340 members supported. So he doesn't like Asian people, and he doesn't like gay people, and he doesn't like women. He doesn't think women are smart enough to choose what they want to do with their own bodies. Like, this is the guy that the UFO community is championing, all because he said Ezekiel's wheel. And he said the magic word Roswell is real. And this is the guy that Matt Ford is championing as this, this champion. It's a joke. It's a joke. It's I don't give a shit about your politics just as long as your belief systems fit mine. And so, it doesn't hold any water when you're complaining about lawmakers, because the lawmakers that are supporting your efforts are also fucking crazy. And they're actually crazier in a lot of ways. And they're not read in. They don't sit on any committees that have access to this classified information. So you know, it's funny in this article, I'm surprised they didn't go after the only thing that Burchett seems to care about is getting the truth on aliens. I mean, that would have been I don't know why they didn't mention that in this article. I think to me, that's a nail in the coffin. And I'd be shocked if he gets reelected. So that's that. So let's listen to Matt Ford, how he's gone from, you know, this political action committee. He calls for people to get fired. He supports harassment and doxing. He's not one of the good guys in this conversation.
My wife and a friend of ours that was friends of up in the house, and conversations with Robert Hastings. At the time, I began having extensive conversations with Robert Hastings. And at that point, about 2 days later, some weird paranormal stuff started happening in the house. And shortly thereafter, orbs began showing up above my house. And we've had not neighbors, but friends of ours witness it. My wife, and it has continued to this day. The last significant orb appeared above our home. I wasn't there to witness it. My wife and a friend of ours that was very alarmed by it witnessed it. So it's continued. But the point I was making to Chris.
The point that he's making is as soon as he started talking to Robert Hastings, all of a sudden orbs started appearing above his house. How spooky. It's like, why am I going to believe this bullshit? Why would anyone believe this guy when he says some crazy shit like that? But yet people do. People do. It's like all of these folks who, Gary Nolan, Matt Ford, Lou Elizondo, did I say Gary Nolan? I mean, all of these voices have seen something. They've all experienced something. They all bring a bias to the table. All of them are bringing their personal experience biases to the table, and that gives them the green light in their heads to be assholes to anyone who dare question their experience. That's why they're so aggressive with this shit. That's why he's so aggressive, because he sees orbs. And when you tell him, yeah, this is all bullshit, he gets really mad. He gets really mad. It's a joke, man. It's a joke. It's a joke. Anyway, guys, that's the show, man. What a killer show. What a freaking fun time I had. Let's turn that down a little bit. There we go. That was a fun show, you guys. I mean, look, I told you that my sort of opinions on Dave Grusch would be maybe a little surprising for some of you guys. I still think I'm leaning toward that he's just grossly wrong about the things he thinks are facts. I think he misinterpreted data. I think that's very possible. I think he's being genuine in some moments, and a lot of other moments, most moments, he's not. We're just gonna have to wait until more facts come out. But yeah, I think some of the things that we went over tonight, I think paint him in a little bit better light. Not much, but a little bit better. And honestly, I want that for him. I really do. I really, really do. I mean, that's my belief. That's my belief system right there showing itself. I want him to be shown in a good light, just like I wanted Lou Elizondo to be in a good light, just like I want Gary Nolan to be in a good light. I want these guys to be right. But the way they treat people, the way they talk to people, the way they harass and endorse the harassment of other people, and how they are the spokespeople and the angry mob bullhorn in a lot of cases, especially with Matt Ford. I mean, it's like, I can't support these guys. I can't trust them. I can't trust them as far as I could throw them. Not that I can want to throw any of them anywhere, but anyway. Listen, man, I like facts and setting the bar higher. I'm not going to just, I mean, look at what Red Panda is doing right now with MH370. The way he's digging his heels in on that case. It's crazy. It's the craziest thing. I don't understand. Like, I don't understand. When the information is as clear as day, you have to follow the data where it leads. And I will do that. I promise you. I promise you. I think I've shown that. So if it's your first time here, please do us a favor and smack that like, share, subscribe button. It goes a long way. So, you know, with that said, don't forget to ring the bell. That way you're notified every time we go live. Want to say thank you to everyone in the chat, man. Again, we had a massive audience today for this show anyway. I mean, this used to be the regular, you know, audience this size, but yeah, it's cool. It's cool to see it kind of come back. I think this conversation in particular doesn't shock me that a lot of people want to hear my take on it. They could either bash me or praise me, one or the other. Whatever you do, doesn't matter to me. Just hit that like, share, subscribe button, you know? So, again, if you want to support the show with the almighty dollar, links are in the description below. Thank you to everyone who donated today. Wow, holy shit. Easily like around $40. That's amazing. Thank you guys. Again, like all of that stuff helps me do more shows. So if you want to see more shows, that's a great way to help. Once again, thank you for embarking on this journey of discovery together. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and thank you for subscribing to Lee Reviews, and thank you for helping us raise the bar. Until next time, we'll see you guys. Have a wonderful night. Enjoy your Thanksgiving tomorrow. And yeah, peace out. Thank you, Stone Ape. I appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Go support Cambion. His show just started. Go show him some love, y'all.